Ever wondered what people ate during the Industrial Revolution? Let's start with the basics. During the Industrial Revolution, which took place roughly between 1760 and 1840, the diets of people underwent significant changes. These changes were largely influenced by factors such as urban growth, industrialization, and socio-economic shifts. But at the heart of it all, the basic staples remained relatively unchanged. The staple diet during this period consisted predominantly of grains. These weren't the exotic quinoa or amaranth grains we see filling the supermarket shelves today, but rather the humble wheat, rye, and maize. These grains, which were often locally grown and readily available, formed the backbone of the diet during the Industrial Revolution. These grains were used in a variety of ways. They were ground into flour and used to make bread, a dietary staple that was consumed at almost every meal. Bread was often eaten with a smidgen of butter, or perhaps some cheese if one was lucky. In times of scarcity, or for those who couldn't afford bread, porridge was a common substitute, providing much-needed calories and nutrition. Beyond bread and porridge, these grains were also used to produce other baked goods. Think of pies, tarts, and pastries. These were all common fare, especially for celebrations and special occasions. Even with the limited variety of ingredients available, people were creative in their culinary endeavors. Though these grains may seem simple and perhaps even boring to our modern palates, they were incredibly important. They provided the majority of the calories and nutrients that people needed to survive and work. In a time before vitamins and supplements, these grains were the fuel that powered the Industrial Revolution. So, while the diets of the Industrial Revolution might not have been as diverse or as colorful as what we're used to today, they were nonetheless vital. They sustained people through long working hours, and they were a testament to the human ability to adapt and thrive even in challenging conditions. So grains formed the foundation of their diet, but what about proteins? Meat was an essential source of protein, however, it wasn't always readily accessible. During the Industrial Revolution, proteins primarily came from animal sources such as pork, beef, and poultry. These meats were a key part of people's diets, providing necessary nutrition to fuel their labor-intensive lifestyles. Yet obtaining these proteins was often a challenge, particularly for those living in burgeoning urban areas. The escalating costs made meat a luxury item, often seen on dinner tables only during special occasions or Sunday roasts. The average working-class family would have found it difficult to afford meat on a regular basis. Instead, they would often substitute it with offal, cheaper cuts, or even meat-flavored soups and broths. But let's not forget another significant source of protein during this period: fish. For those fortunate enough to live near the coast or along riverbanks, fish was a crucial part of their diet. Fish was not just a source of protein, but also provided essential nutrients like omega-3 fatty acids. The bounty of the sea or river was not just a summer treat. People developed ingenious ways to preserve fish, so it could be enjoyed all year round. Salted fish, smoked fish, even pickled fish were common fare. These preservation techniques not only extended the shelf life of the fish, but also added a unique flavor that became a characteristic of the cuisine of the time. Fish, although less prestigious than meat, offered an affordable and nutritious alternative. It was a lifeline for many families, particularly those who couldn't afford the higher-priced meats. But let's not forget that both meat and fish were luxuries for many. The ordinary working folk had to make do with what was available and affordable, which often meant a diet heavy on grains and light on proteins. From land to sea, proteins were an important part of the diet, but what about vegetables and fruits? This question takes us to the next chapter of dietary habits during the Industrial Revolution. Vegetables and fruits were a part of the diet, but their availability often depended on the season. In the years of the Industrial Revolution, vegetables such as potatoes, cabbages, carrots, and onions were common food items. Potatoes in particular became incredibly popular due to their versatility. They could be boiled, mashed, or roasted, and provided a good source of energy. Cabbages offered a source of vitamins, while carrots and onions were often used to flavor stews and soups. However, the consumption of these vegetables was often limited to the seasons when they were fresh. With the absence of modern refrigeration or transportation, fresh vegetables were not always available year-round. During the colder months, people relied on preserved vegetables or root vegetables that could be stored for a longer period of time. What about fruits, you ask? Well, fresh fruit was considered a luxury during this period. Apples, pears, and berries were some of the common fruits consumed, but again their availability was limited to their growing season. Fruits were often made into preserves or pies to extend their shelf life. In some parts of society, particularly the upper classes, exotic fruits like pineapples and oranges were a sign of wealth and status. These fruits were expensive and difficult to obtain, making them a rare treat reserved for special occasions. In essence, the diet during the Industrial Revolution was largely dictated by the seasons. The availability and variety of food fluctuated throughout the year, with an abundance of fresh produce in the warmer months and a reliance on preserved or stored foods during the colder months. So they had grains, proteins, and some fruits and vegetables, but how did they keep their food fresh? Without modern refrigeration, food preservation was a significant challenge. In the years of the Industrial Revolution, the art of keeping food edible for as long as possible was a crucial skill. Imagine a world without your trusty fridge or freezer, where you had to rely on nature's elements and your own ingenuity to keep your food from spoiling. One of the most common methods of preservation was salting. This involved liberally applying salt to food, especially meat and fish, to draw out moisture and create an environment inhospitable to bacteria. It was not unusual to find barrels of salted pork or herring in the pantries of households during this era. Smoking was another popular technique. Food would be exposed to smoke, often from wood fires, which not only preserved the food, but also imparted a unique flavor. Smoked hams and fish were staples in many homes. Drying was a more straightforward method, particularly for fruits, vegetables, and herbs. These items would be left in the sun, or alternatively in an oven to slowly lose their moisture, thus extending their shelf life. Dried apples, for example, could be rehydrated and used in pies or puddings months after the harvest season. Pickling was another common practice. Vinegar or brine was used to create an acidic environment where bacteria could not thrive. This method was often used for preserving vegetables like cucumbers or onions, but could also be used for eggs and certain types of meat. These preservation techniques were essential in a time when fresh food was not always readily available. However, they were not without their drawbacks. The high salt content could make the food overly salty and potentially unhealthy, while drying could rob the food of much of its original taste and texture. In the end, the ingenuity and resilience of people during the Industrial Revolution ensured that, despite the lack of modern conveniences, they could still enjoy a variety of foods throughout the year. Food preservation was a challenge, but what about the quality and safety of food? The quality and safety of food during the Industrial Revolution were often precarious. The rapid urbanization and industrial growth brought about a new set of challenges when it came to food safety. With the absence of regulations, sanitary controls, and adequate food inspection systems, the risk of food adulteration and contamination was alarmingly high. It was not uncommon for unscrupulous traders to take advantage of the situation, selling substandard or even spoiled food to unsuspecting consumers. Furthermore, the lack of understanding about bacteria and disease meant that poor food handling practices were widespread. Consequently, foodborne illnesses were a common occurrence. In a world where the concept of best before dates was non-existent and the lack of refrigeration technology meant food spoilage was a daily concern, people had to walk a tightrope to balance their need for sustenance with the risk of foodborne illnesses. Food safety wasn't always ensured, but what about drinking water? Drinking water wasn't always safe due to pollution and the lack of purification systems. This was a harsh reality during the Industrial Revolution, a time marked by rapid urban growth and industrialization. The water sources were often contaminated, making them unfit for consumption. Consequently, people had to find alternatives to quench their thirst. Beer and cider became the beverages of choice. They were not only refreshing, but were also considered safer to drink. The process of fermentation in beer and cider production acted as a natural purifier, eliminating potential health hazards. Moreover, stronger spirits like gin and whiskey also gained popularity. These liquors provided a punch of flavor and a means of escape from the harsh realities of life during the Industrial Revolution. However, this reliance on alcoholic beverages wasn't without its problems. Alcoholism and related health issues became more prevalent. So during the Industrial Revolution, people's diets were often based on simple and unprocessed foods, with a limited variety of ingredients and questionable quality and safety of food.